The blood-soaked stranger who collapsed on Mercy Dalton's porch that stormy night was barely alive, clutching a newborn baby to his chest with his last breath of strength. She had no idea that saving this wounded rancher and his infant daughter would drag her into a deadly feud with the most ruthless men in the Arizona Territory. What started as an act of mercy would become a fight for survival, as Mercy found herself raising another woman's child, while bullets flew and bounty hunters circled her remote ranch like vultures. But when the final showdown came, and Sam Hayes had to choose between running from his blood-soaked past or standing his ground, Mercy Dalton would prove that sometimes the strongest bonds aren't forged by blood, they're forged by fire. This is the story of how a lonely horse breeder became a mother, how a broken man found redemption, and how love can bloom even in the shadow of death. By the time you reach the end, you'll understand why some debts can only be paid in blood, and why the most dangerous thing you can give a desperate person is hope. The knock came during the worst storm Copper Falls had seen in years, when lightning split the desert sky like God's own fury, and thunder rolled across Mesa Ridge like cannon fire. Mercy Dalton was tending to her pregnant mare in the barn when she heard it, barely more than a scraping against wood, weaker than the wind rattling her shutters. But out here in the Arizona Territory, even dying men knew better than to come calling after midnight. She grabbed her father's old Colt .45 from the nail by the door and approached with the caution of a woman who'd learned that kindness could kill you just as quick as cruelty. When she pulled back the heavy wooden door, what she found stole the breath from her lungs. A man lay crumpled on her porch like a discarded coat, blood pooling beneath his torn shirt. His face was ghost pale in the lamplight, stubbled jaw slack with unconsciousness. But it wasn't the bullet hole in his shoulder or the fever burning in his skin that made Mercy's heart stop cold. It was the bundle pressed against his chest, a tiny infant wrapped in a blood-stained shawl, so small she could have fit in a saddlebag. The baby's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow but steady, and even in his delirium, the man's arms were positioned just so, protecting her from the rain and his own wounds. "Sweet Mary and Joseph," Mercy whispered, dropping to her knees without thinking. The man's pulse was thready, his breathing ragged, but alive. The child couldn't be more than a few days old, let out a weak cry that cut through the storm like a blade. Mercy had delivered enough foals to know desperation when she saw it, and this man was running on nothing but will and fear. She eased the baby from his arms first, checking for injuries, for fever. The infant was cold but breathing, hungry but unharmed. Then she turned to the man. His coat was shredded, his boots worn down to the sole. Fresh blood mixed with old on his shirt, and when she pressed her hand to his chest, she felt the flutter of a heart working too hard to keep a body that had given up everything but its last purpose. That's when she heard the riders. Hoofbeats echoed across the canyon, like thunder that wouldn't quit, coming fast from the direction of town. Mercy's blood turned to ice water as she counted them. At least 4 horses, maybe more, riding hard through weather that would kill a sensible man. She dragged the stranger inside, just as the first rider crested the hill near her property line. Through the crack in her shutters, she watched them approach. 5 men in black coats with rifles across their saddles, led by a tall figure she recognized even in the darkness. Sheriff Wade Brennan dismounted first, his deputy close behind. But it was the third man who made Mercy's hand tighten on her pistol grip, Jeremiah Cross, the territory's most feared bounty hunter, with eyes like chips of flint and a smile that belonged in a graveyard. "Miss Dalton," Sheriff Brennan called out, his voice cutting through the rain. "Sorry to trouble you at this hour, but we're tracking a dangerous man, armed and wounded, traveling with stolen goods. You seen anyone come this way?" Mercy stood frozen in her doorway, the unconscious stranger bleeding on her kitchen floor behind her, his infant daughter cradled in her left arm. Through the window, she could see Cross studying her porch, his gaze lingering on the dark stains the rain was washing away. Named Samuel Hayes, the sheriff continued. Wanted for murder and theft down Tombstone Way. Probably desperate, probably dangerous. He's got something that don't belong to him. The baby stirred in Mercy's arms, and she pressed the child closer to muffle any sound. Behind her, the man, Sam Hayes, lay motionless, his breathing so shallow she couldn't tell if he was dying or already dead. "You sure you ain't seen nothing, ma'am?" Cross spoke for the first time, his voice smooth as snake oil. Man like that, bleeding the way he was, he couldn't have gotten far. That's when Mercy Dalton made the choice that would change everything. She looked Sheriff Brennan straight in the eye, shifted the baby to hide her better in the folds of her shawl, and lied with the conviction of a woman who'd learned that sometimes salvation wore the face of sin. "No riders came this way, Sheriff, just me and the storm." The silence stretched like a rope about to snap. Cross's smile widened, but he didn't call her out. Not yet. They rode off into the night, but Mercy knew they'd be back. Men like Cross didn't give up easy, and whatever Sam Hayes had done, whatever he'd taken, it was worth enough to hunt him through hell itself. As she bolted the door and turned back to the bleeding stranger on her floor, Mercy whispered to the darkness, "Lord help me. I hope you're worth the trouble you just brought to my door." 3 weeks before that blood-soaked night, Mercy Dalton had been facing her own kind of desperation. She stood in the dusty main street of Copper Falls, watching the last stagecoach disappear into the desert haze, carrying with it her final ranch hand and any hope of running her horse breeding operation alone. The drought had been merciless that summer. Silver Creek had dwindled to a trickle, her prize stallion had thrown a shoe that went septic, and the banknote on her land was coming due faster than a rattlesnake strike. At 28, Mercy had buried both parents, outlasted 2 harsh winters, and built a reputation for breeding the finest horses in the territory. But even the strongest woman had limits, and hers were wearing thin as old leather. Her ranch sat 2 miles north of Copper Falls, nestled against the red rocks of Mesa Ridge, where the wind sang through the canyons, and the sunsets painted the sky like spilled blood. It wasn't much. A sturdy adobe house her father had built with his own hands, a barn that had weathered 20 years of storms, and enough good grazing land to support a small herd. But it was hers, every hard-won acre of it. The decision to post the notice had come after she'd found her favorite mare, Estrella, down with colic and no strong back to help lift her. Mercy had spent 6 hours that night walking the horse, praying and cursing in equal measure, until the animal finally passed the blockage and survived. But the message was clear as desert sky. She couldn't do it alone anymore. So she'd swallowed her pride, took her best dress out of mothballs, and rode into town to post a notice at Murphy's Saloon. Capable man wanted for horse ranch work. Room, board, modest wages. No drinkers, no drifters. No men looking for easy money. Serious inquiries only. M. Dalton, Mesa Ridge Ranch. For a week, nothing. Then Murphy himself had handed her a folded piece of paper one afternoon, his weathered face unreadable. "Came in with the morning rider," he'd said. "Fellow who brought it said to tell you he'd be here by month's end if you're still needing help." The letter was brief, written in a careful hand that spoke of education. "Miss Dalton, I'm no stranger to horses or hard work. Don't drink to excess, don't gamble, don't run from honest labor. Been ranching most of my life, though circumstances have made me a traveling man these past months. If you're willing to judge a man by his work rather than his past, I'll be there come September's end. Respectfully, S. Hayes." Something about the letter had settled in Mercy's chest, like hope trying to take root in dry ground. The handwriting was steady, the words respectful but not servile. There was a weariness between the lines that she recognized, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd lost more than they could bear, but wasn't ready to quit breathing yet. Meanwhile, 300 miles south in the ruins of what had once been the Hayes family ranch, Sam was writing a very different kind of letter. His hands shook as he pressed the pencil to paper, the infant Emma sleeping fitfully in a makeshift crib he'd fashioned from a feed box and old blankets. "My dearest Elizabeth," he wrote, though his wife would never read the words. "Our daughter draws breath, though you could not stay to see it. She has your eyes, your stubborn chin. I've named her Emma, after your mother, and I pray daily that some part of your gentle spirit lives on in her." The baby stirred, and Sam paused to check her breathing, to adjust the thin blanket that was all he could spare. Around him, the charred remains of his homestead stood like broken teeth against the horizon. 3 days earlier, Jeremiah Cross and his men had come collecting on behalf of Marcus Thornfield, the territorial judge who'd bought Sam's debt from a desperate bank. But it hadn't been about money, not really. It had been about Elizabeth, about the mining claims her father had left her, about rights to silver-rich land that Sam had inherited through marriage. When he'd refused to sign over the claims, when he'd told Cross that the land would go to his daughter when she came of age, they'd made their position clear with fire and bullets. Elizabeth had died giving birth during the attack, brought on by the stress and terror of watching their home burn. Sam had delivered Emma himself in the root cellar, while gunfire echoed overhead, his wife's blood mixing with tears as she whispered their daughter's name and slipped away. Now he was a man with nothing left to lose except the tiny life depending on him for everything. He'd buried Elizabeth in the rose garden she'd tended so carefully, said his goodbyes to the only home he'd ever known, and started riding north with whatever supplies he could carry and a baby who cried when she was hungry and slept when she felt safe in his arms. The job posting in Copper Falls had been Providence, a chance to disappear, to give Emma a place to grow up far from the men who wanted her inheritance badly enough to kill for it. Sam had no illusions about his situation. Cross would come looking eventually. Men like that always did, but maybe if he was careful, if he kept his head down and worked honest, he could buy Emma enough time to grow up strong before the past caught up with them. He sealed the letter to his dead wife, tucked it into his saddlebag next to the last of their money, and picked up his daughter. "Come on, little one," he whispered against her soft hair. "Time to go find us a new life." Neither Sam nor Mercy could have known that destiny had already marked their paths to cross, that salvation and damnation often wore the same face, or that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was exactly the right thing. The month's end was coming, and with it, a reckoning that would test everything they thought they knew about courage, loyalty, and the price of hope. Sam Hayes woke to the smell of coffee and cornbread, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and the sound of a woman humming softly in what he assumed was the kitchen. For a moment he thought he was dead. The pain in his shoulder had dulled to a manageable ache, his fever had broken, and he was clean, wrapped in quilts that smelled like lavender and desert sage. Then he heard Emma crying. He bolted upright, ignoring the fire that shot through his wounded shoulder, and found himself face to face with Mercy Dalton. She stood in the doorway, holding his daughter, a coffee cup in her free hand and an expression on her face that was equal parts wariness and something that might have been kindness. "Easy there," she said, her voice carrying the authority of a woman used to calming spooked horses. "Your little girl's fine. Fed her goat's milk from a bottle about an hour ago. She took to it better than most calves." Sam's eyes locked onto Emma, cataloging every detail. Her color was good, her breathing steady. She'd been changed and wrapped in a soft yellow blanket he didn't recognize. Only when he was satisfied she was truly safe did he look back at Mercy. "How long?" he asked, his voice still rough with fever. 3 days. You've been talking in your sleep. Fever dreams mostly. Nothing coherent." She paused, studying his face. "Though you did call out for Elizabeth more than once." Sam's jaw tightened. "She's gone. I figured as much." Mercy moved closer, settling into a chair beside the bed. "Question is, what brings a man with a newborn baby to my porch with a bullet hole in his shoulder and half the territory's law looking for him. You don't want to know. I saved your life and I'm feeding your daughter. I reckon that earns me some truth. Sam looked at her then, really looked. Mercy Dalton was built like desert ironwood, lean, strong, weathered by sun and wind, but not broken by them. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical braid, her hands showed the calluses of honest work, and her green eyes held the kind of steady intelligence that came from years of making hard decisions alone. Sheriff said you killed a man, said you stole something. Sheriff's half right. Sam shifted carefully, testing his mobility. I killed a man, but it wasn't murder, and I didn't steal what they're after. I inherited it fair and legal. What kind of inheritance gets a man shot and hunted? Sam was quiet for a long moment, listening to Emma's soft breathing. Silver claims. My wife's father found a rich vein up in the Dragoon Mountains before he died. Left everything to Elizabeth, which meant it came to me when we married. There's men who think those claims should belong to them instead. What kind of men? The kind that don't take no for an answer. Sam's hand moved unconsciously to where his Colt usually hung. When I wouldn't sell, they decided to take what they wanted by force. Elizabeth died in the attack. I killed one of them getting away. And now they want me dead, and Emma. He swallowed hard. They want Emma because those claims will be hers when she comes of age. Mercy absorbed this information, like desert sand soaking up rain, quickly, completely, with no visible reaction. How'd you know about my job posting? Heard about it in Tucson. Figured a horse ranch in the middle of nowhere was about as good a place as any to disappear. And you thought you'd just show up, work for room and board, and hope your troubles wouldn't follow? Sam met her gaze directly. I hoped I'd have time to figure out something better. Mercy stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the red rocks of Mesa Ridge. Well, your troubles are already here. That man with the sheriff the other night, Jeremiah Cross. He's got a reputation for finding people who don't want to be found. I know who Cross is. Then you know he won't give up easy. She turned back to face him. Question is, what are we going to do about it? The word we hung in the air between them like smoke from a distant fire. Sam stared at her, this woman who barely knew him, who had every reason to turn him out and wash her hands of his problems. Why? He asked simply. Mercy was quiet for a moment, her gaze moving to Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. I lost a baby once, she said finally. 5 years ago, born too early, lived 3 days. Her father rode off before she drew her first breath, and I buried her alone under the cottonwood by Silver Creek. Sam felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of shared grief. This little one, Mercy continued, gently touching Emma's cheek. She's got nobody but you, and you're hurt, hunted, with winter coming on. I reckon she needs someone looking out for both of you. I can work, Sam said firmly. Soon as the shoulder heals, I can pull my weight. I know horses, cattle, can fix most anything that breaks. I won't be dead weight. Prove it. Mercy handed Emma back to him, and Sam felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over him, like a well-worn coat. You get well, you work hard, you keep your past from landing on my doorstep in ways I can't handle, and we'll see how this arrangement suits. And if Cross comes back, Mercy's smile was sharp as broken glass. Then he'll find out that some women don't scare as easy as he thinks. As she left him alone with his daughter, Sam realized he'd found something he'd thought was lost forever. Hope. It was fragile, uncertain, built on the kindness of a stranger and his own desperate need to believe in second chances. But it was real. For the first time since Elizabeth died, Sam Hayes allowed himself to think they might actually survive. 2 weeks of careful recovery had transformed Sam from a dying man into something resembling the capable ranch hand Mercy had advertised for. His shoulder still ached in the mornings, but he could swing an axe, mend fence, and handle the more temperamental horses with a gentle authority that impressed even Mercy's critical eye. Emma, meanwhile, had settled into ranch life like she'd been born to it. She slept peacefully in the makeshift crib Sam had built from scrap lumber, gurgled contentedly when Mercy sang while doing chores, and had developed the healthy appetite of a child who finally felt safe enough to thrive. But peace in the Arizona Territory was as rare as rain in August, and Mercy should have known it wouldn't last. She found the letter by accident while cleaning out the spare room where Sam had been sleeping. It had fallen behind the washstand, probably knocked loose when he'd been delirious with fever. The paper was worn soft from handling. Creased and refolded so many times the ink had begun to fade at the edges. Mercy almost didn't read it. She'd been raised to respect privacy, and Sam had given her no reason to mistrust him. But something about the careful way he'd been guarding his saddlebags, the way he sometimes stared off toward the southern horizon with haunted eyes, made her unfold the letter with trembling fingers. Judge Marcus Thornfield, Territorial Court, Tucson, Hayes Mining Claims, Dragoon Mountains. Sir, as discussed, the unfortunate death of Samuel Hayes and his infant daughter in the recent Apache raid will clear the way for transfer of said mining claims to your designated representative. The bodies were burned beyond recognition, naturally, but witnesses will confirm the tragedy. Your payment as agreed upon completion. J. Cross. The letter was dated a week ago. Mercy sank onto the narrow bed, the paper shaking in her hands as the implications crashed over her like a flash flood. Cross hadn't been hunting Sam to bring him to justice. He'd been hunting him to murder him. Worse, the whole story about Apache raids was a lie designed to cover up the assassination of a man and his baby daughter. And Judge Thornfield, she knew that name. Every rancher in the territory knew Marcus Thornfield, the territorial judge who'd been buying up mining claims and water rights faster than a man could count. If he wanted Sam's silver claims badly enough to order murder, those mountains held more wealth than Sam probably even knew. Find something interesting? Mercy spun around to find Sam standing in the doorway, his face carefully neutral, but his eyes sharp as flint. Emma was in his arms, content and oblivious to the tension suddenly crackling through the room. This fell behind the washstand. Mercy held out the letter, watching his expression carefully. I wasn't snooping, but... Sam shifted Emma to one arm and took the letter, reading it quickly. When he looked up, his face had gone pale as desert bone. Where did you get this? It was in your things, must have fallen out during your fever. Mercy stood slowly, her hand unconsciously moving toward the pistol she kept on her hip. Sam, this letter says you and Emma are supposed to be dead. It's signed by the man who was here looking for you. Sam was quiet for a long moment, staring at the letter like it was a rattlesnake about to strike. Finally, he sank into the room's single chair, still holding Emma close. I took it off one of Cross's men, he said quietly. The night they burned my ranch, found it in his saddlebag after he swallowed hard, after I killed him. So you knew. You knew they weren't just after you for debt or even for murder. They want you dead so they can steal your wife's inheritance. Elizabeth's father found the richest silver vein anyone's seen since the Comstock lode. Assay reports said it could be worth more than $500,000, maybe more. Sam's voice was barely above a whisper. Thornfield's been trying to buy up all the mining rights in that area for months. Our claims were the only ones he couldn't get legally. Mercy felt something cold settle in her stomach. $500,000. Sam, that's enough money to buy half the territorial legislature. It's enough money to make sure a man like Cross never stops hunting. Sam looked up at her, and Mercy saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not just fear, but guilt. I should have told you. I should have taken Emma and kept running instead of putting you in danger. Why didn't you? Sam looked down at his daughter, sleeping peacefully despite the storm building around her young life. Because I'm tired of running. Because Emma deserves better than spending her life looking over her shoulder. And because he met Mercy's eyes again. Because for the first time since Elizabeth died, I thought maybe we'd found somewhere we could stay. Mercy walked to the window and stared out at the red rocks of Mesa Ridge, her mind racing. $500,000 in silver would make Emma one of the richest children in the territory, if she lived long enough to inherit it. But it also painted a target on her back that would never fade, as long as men like Thornfield and Cross drew breath. "They think you're dead," she said finally. "For now. We could keep it that way, change your name, change Emma's. You could be Sam Dalton, my hired hand who married the boss for practical reasons. Emma could be ours." Sam stared at her. "You'd do that? Take on that kind of danger?" Mercy turned from the window, her jaw set with the same determination that had kept her ranch running through drought, death, and every other hardship the desert could throw at her. "Sam, I've been alone on this land for 5 years. I've fought off claim jumpers, rustlers, and men who thought a woman had no business owning property. I'm not about to let some corrupt judge and his hired killer drive off the best ranch hand I've ever had just because they're greedy." She paused, looking at Emma sleeping in Sam's arms. "Besides," she added softly, "that little girl needs a mother, and I've got room in my heart for both of you, if you'll have me." For the first time since she'd known him, Sam Hayes smiled. The first warning came with the autumn winds that swept down from Mesa Ridge, carrying with it the smell of smoke and trouble. Mercy was breaking a young stallion in the corral when she spotted the dust cloud rising from the south, too deliberate to be wild horses, too fast to be a merchant wagon. "Sam," she called out, never taking her eyes off the approaching riders, "get Emma inside, now." Sam didn't question her tone. He scooped up the baby from where she'd been napping in the shade of the porch and disappeared into the house. By the time the 3 riders crested the hill overlooking the ranch, Mercy was standing alone in her yard, Winchester rifle cradled casually in her arms. The lead rider was a stranger, a thin man with cold eyes and a badge that gleamed too bright in the desert sun. Behind him rode 2 men Mercy recognized from the saloons in Copper Falls, the kind of drifters who'd do anything for whiskey money. "Miss Dalton," the man with the badge called out as they approached. "Name's Deputy Carson, Territorial Marshal's office. We're investigating reports of Apache activity in this area. You seen anything unusual lately?" Mercy's blood turned to ice water. Apache activity, the same lie Cross had planned to use to explain Sam and Emma's deaths. She kept her expression neutral, but her grip tightened on the rifle. "Been quiet as a church on my land, Deputy. What kind of Apache activity?" Carson dismounted, his hand resting on his gun butt, in a way that was meant to look casual, but felt like a threat. Attacks on isolated ranches, whole families murdered, bodies burned. Real tragic business. "Sounds terrible," Mercy replied evenly, "but I haven't seen hide nor hair of any Apache. Course, they tend to avoid places where folks know how to shoot back." One of the other men, a scarred brute with tobacco-stained teeth, snickered. "Mighty brave talk for a woman alone out here." "Who says I'm alone?" The words were out before Mercy could stop them, and she saw Carson's eyes narrow with interest. Behind the house, she caught a glimpse of movement at the kitchen window. Sam, watching with Emma in his arms. "That's so?" Carson stepped closer. "Mind if we take a look around? Make sure everything's secure?" "I mind plenty." Mercy raised the rifle just enough to make her point clear. "This is private property, and unless you've got a warrant signed by a real judge, you can turn around and ride back where you came from." The tension stretched tight as a bowstring. Carson's hand moved closer to his gun, and Mercy calculated distances, angles, how fast she could work the Winchester's action. She'd grown up hunting with her father. At this range, she wouldn't miss. "Now that's not very neighborly," Carson said softly. "We're just trying to keep folks safe." "Then I suggest you go keep someone else safe. My land's already spoken for." For a moment, Mercy thought it would come to shooting. Then Carson smiled. a cold reptilian expression that made her skin crawl. "We'll be back to check on you, Miss Dalton. Make sure you're still safe." They rode off, but not far. Mercy watched through her spyglass as they made camp in the rocks about 2 miles south, close enough to watch the ranch, but far enough to avoid her rifle. That night, she and Sam took turns on watch, while Emma slept in the root cellar they'd hastily prepared as a hiding place. The second warning came 3 days later in the form of Martha Finch, the general store owner from Copper Falls. She arrived in her buckboard just after dawn, her usually cheerful face drawn with worry. "Mercy, honey, I had to come warn you," Martha said, accepting a cup of coffee with shaking hands. "There's been talk in town, bad talk." "What kind of talk?" "Jeremiah Cross was in yesterday, asking questions about you, about whether you'd hired any new hands lately, whether anyone had seen strangers around your place." Martha lowered her voice. "He was offering money, Mercy. Good money for information." Sam, who'd been listening from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. "Did anyone tell him anything?" Martha shook her head. "Most folks in Copper Falls don't much care for bounty hunters, especially ones who work for Judge Thornfield. But Mercy, there's something else. Cross has been recruiting. Word is, he's got near a dozen men now, all armed, all mean." "A dozen men for one ranch hand?" Mercy tried to keep her voice light, but her stomach was churning. "That's what worries me," Martha replied. "Whatever you folks are mixed up in, it's bigger than just one man's troubles." After Martha left, Mercy and Sam sat in heavy silence, while Emma played with a wooden rattle Sam had carved for her. The baby's innocent laughter seemed to mock the danger closing in around them. "We could run," Sam said finally. "Take Emma and head for California, maybe Oregon Territory. Running didn't work for you before. This is different. They know where we are now. It's only a matter of time before—" He was cut off by the sound of gunfire from the direction of town. A single shot, then silence. Mercy grabbed her spyglass and climbed onto the roof, scanning the horizon until she found what she was looking for. Smoke was rising from Copper Falls. "Sam," she called down, her voice tight with dread. "Saddle the horses, now." They rode hard toward town, Emma secured in a carrier on Sam's back, and found Copper Falls in chaos. Murphy's saloon was burning, and Doc Patterson lay bleeding in the street, while his wife tried to tend his wounds. "What happened?" Mercy demanded, kneeling beside the doctor. "Cross happened," Doc Patterson gasped. "Said he was looking for information about Apache raids. When Murphy told him to go to hell, Cross shot him dead. Then he burned the saloon and told everyone that's what happens to towns that harbor fugitives." Mercy felt the last of her illusions crumble. This wasn't just about Sam and Emma anymore. Cross was making it clear that anyone who helped them would pay the price. "How many dead?" Sam asked quietly. "Just Murphy so far." "But Cross left a message." Doc Patterson struggled to sit up. "Said to tell the woman at Mesa Ridge Ranch that she's got until Sunday to turn over what belongs to Judge Thornfield. After that, he stops being polite." Sunday was 3 days away. As they rode back to the ranch in grim silence, Mercy made a decision that would have terrified her father, and probably should have terrified her. But fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Sam," she said as they approached their land, "I hope you remember how to fight, because running time is over." Sunday came with a blood-red dawn that painted Mesa Ridge the color of old violence. Mercy woke before first light to find Sam already up, checking his weapons with the methodical precision of a man who'd done this before. Emma slept peacefully in her makeshift crib, unaware that this might be her last morning in the only home she'd ever known. They'd spent the previous 2 days preparing like generals before a siege. The root cellar had been reinforced and stocked with enough supplies to last a week. Sam had positioned rifles at strategic windows throughout the house, while Mercy had rigged tripwires and pitfall traps along the most likely approach routes. They'd even practiced their escape plan. If things went badly, Sam would take Emma through the hidden tunnel that led from the cellar to the old mine shaft in the hillside behind the house. But neither of them spoke of escape now. They'd made their choice to stand and fight. "You don't have to do this," Sam said quietly as they shared what might be their last peaceful breakfast. "Take Emma and ride for the territorial capital. Tell the real authorities what Thornfield's been doing." Mercy poured coffee with steady hands, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "You think they'd believe the word of a woman rancher against a territorial judge? Even with that letter, it's our word against his. Better than dying for it. Some things are worth dying for." She looked at Emma, gurgling happily in Sam's arms. That little girl deserves to inherit what her mother left her, and she deserves to grow up in a world where men like Cross can't just take whatever they want. The sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the morning air like a blade. Mercy grabbed her spyglass and climbed to the loft window, counting riders as they emerged from the canyon to the south. 12 men, she called down to Sam. Cross is leading them, and they're flying a white flag. That's something at least. But when the riders drew close enough for Mercy to see their faces clearly, her blood turned to ice. These weren't just hired guns, they were killers, the kind of men who'd burn a church with the congregation still inside if the price was right. Cross himself rode at the front, his black coat whipping in the desert wind. Even from a distance, Mercy could see the cruel smile playing at his lips. He dismounted just outside rifle range and cupped his hands to his mouth. "Miss Dalton, Samuel Hayes, time to settle accounts." Sam appeared beside Mercy at the window, Emma secured in a sling across his chest. "Let me talk to him." "Sam Hayes," Cross continued, "you've got something that belongs to Judge Thornfield. Send out the child and the mining claims, and we'll make this quick and clean." "The hell we will," Mercy muttered, but Sam was already moving toward the front door. "Hayes," Cross's voice carried easily across the distance, "you've caused a lot of trouble for a dead man. But the judge is feeling generous. Hand over what's ours, and the woman can keep her ranch." Sam stepped onto the porch, his rifle in his hands but not raised. "The claims belong to my daughter. They were her mother's legacy." Cross's laughter was like breaking glass. "Dead women don't own property, Hayes, and dead babies don't inherit. You should have stayed buried." "Then come and bury me." The parley was over. Cross raised his hand, and his men spread out in a wide circle around the ranch. Mercy counted positions, calculated angles. They were outnumbered 6-1, but they had cover and the high ground. It would have to be enough. The first shot came from the barn, where one of Cross's men had been trying to flank them. Mercy's answer cracked from the loft window, and the man dropped like a stone. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from every direction at once. Bullets splintered the porch posts and shattered windows. Sam fired from the kitchen, his shots measured and deadly accurate. Mercy worked the lever action of her Winchester like a woman possessed, forcing Cross's men to keep their heads down, but they kept coming. One man made it to the side of the house before Sam's bullet found him. Another reached the barn and set it ablaze with a flaming torch. The smell of smoke and gunpowder filled the air as the battle raged through the morning. Then Mercy heard the sound that turned her blood to ice. Emma crying from the cellar below. "Sam," she screamed over the gunfire, "Emma's awake." In that moment of distraction, Cross made his move. He sprinted across the open ground toward the house, his men laying down covering fire. Sam swung his rifle around, but Cross was already at the porch steps. The two men collided like freight trains, grappling for control of Sam's weapon. They crashed through the front door and into the kitchen, fighting with the desperate fury of men who knew only one of them would walk away. Mercy tried to get a clear shot, but they were moving too fast, locked together in mortal combat. Then she heard Cross's triumphant laugh as he gained the upper hand, pinning Sam to the floor with a knife at his throat. "Should have stayed dead, Hayes." That's when Mercy Dalton proved that hell hath no fury like a woman protecting her family. She dropped her rifle, drew her father's old Colt .45 and put a bullet square between Jeremiah Cross's eyes. The bounty hunter toppled backward, surprise frozen on his face. Outside, the gunfire sputtered and died as Cross's remaining men realized their leader was dead. "Anyone else want to try collecting Judge Thornfield's blood money?" Mercy shouted from the porch, her smoking pistol trained on the survivors. The answer was the thunder of hoofbeats as the hired guns fled south toward the desert, leaving their dead behind. In the sudden silence that followed, Emma's cries echoed from the cellar like a promise that life would go on. The territorial marshal arrived 3 days later with a full escort and a warrant for Judge Marcus Thornfield's arrest. Marshal William Drake was a weathered man with honest eyes and a reputation for cleaning up corruption wherever he found it. He'd ridden hard from the capital after receiving a package that contained Cross's letter, witness statements from half the surviving population of Copper Falls, and a detailed account of the events at Mesa Ridge Ranch, written in Mercy's careful hand. "Miss Dalton," Marshal Drake said, tipping his hat as he dismounted in her yard, "I understand you've had some trouble." Mercy emerged from the house with Emma in her arms, Sam close behind. The baby had grown noticeably in the weeks since the shootout, her cheeks fuller and her eyes bright with the curiosity of a child who felt safe enough to explore her world. "Nothing we couldn't handle, Marshal," Mercy replied, though the fresh graves behind the barn told a different story. Drake's gaze swept over the bullet holes in the porch posts, the charred remains of part of the barn, and the bloodstains that desert sand hadn't quite absorbed. "So I can see. Judge Thornfield sends his regrets about the misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Sam's voice carried an edge that could cut glass. "Poor choice of words," Drake admitted. "What I mean to say is that after reviewing the evidence you provided, along with some interesting documents we found in the judge's private safe, Thornfield has decided to retire from public service immediately." "And the mining claims?" Mercy asked. "Belonged to Miss Emma Hayes, free and clear. We found forged documents, bribed officials, and enough evidence of corruption to hang a dozen men." Drake pulled out a leather portfolio. "These are the legal papers restoring full ownership to the child, with Samuel Hayes listed as her guardian and trustee until she comes of age." Sam took the documents with hands that trembled slightly. After months of running, fighting, and fearing for his daughter's life, it seemed impossible that a few pieces of paper could end the nightmare. "What about Cross's men? The ones who got away?" "Scattered to the wind once word got out that their boss was dead and their employer was in federal custody. Men like that don't show loyalty when there's no money involved." Drake paused, studying Sam carefully. "Course, there's still the matter of that killing down in Tombstone." Mercy tensed, but Drake held up a hand. "Self-defense, according to the witnesses we finally managed to track down. Seems Cross's man drew first when you tried to protect your property during the raid. No charges will be filed." The relief that washed over Sam's face was like watching a man discover he could breathe again after nearly drowning. "There is one more thing," Drake continued. "The territorial government is offering a reward for your assistance in exposing Thornfield's corruption. $5,000, plus an official commendation." $5,000 was more money than Mercy had seen in her entire life. Enough to rebuild the barn, expand the horse breeding operation, maybe even hire proper ranch hands. But what mattered more was the vindication, the official recognition that they'd been right to fight. "We're grateful, Marshal," Mercy said, "but we've got everything we need right here." Drake smiled, the expression transforming his stern features. "I had a feeling you'd say that. Still, the money's yours if you want it. Territory owes you a debt for what you did." After the marshal and his men rode away, taking their official papers and government commendations with them, Mercy and Sam stood together on the porch, watching the sun set behind Mesa Ridge. Emma dozed contentedly in Sam's arms, her tiny hand curled around his finger. "Hard to believe it's really over," Sam said quietly. "Is it? Over, I mean. Mercy studied his profile in the fading light. You're free now. Emma's inheritance is secure. You could go anywhere, do anything. Sam was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the red rocks that had sheltered them through the worst of the storm. I spent so long running from the past that I forgot how to plan for the future. But Emma needs stability, needs a place to call home. And what do you need? He turned to look at her then, and Mercy saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip like a stone across water. I need a reason to stay in one place. I need work that matters, land worth protecting. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I need someone who'll fight beside me instead of running when things get difficult. Mercy felt tears she didn't expect prick at her eyes. Sam Hayes, are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'd consider making this arrangement permanent. For Emma's sake, he added quickly, then caught himself. For all our sakes. Instead of answering with words, Mercy reached over and took Emma from his arms, settling the baby against her shoulder with the practiced ease of a woman born to motherhood. The child sighed softly and snuggled closer, as if she'd always belonged there. I reckon this little one needs both her parents, Mercy said finally, and I reckon we've all earned the right to be happy. Sam's smile was like sunrise after the longest night of winter. Then I guess we'd better start planning a wedding. As if in agreement, Emma let out a soft coo that sounded remarkably like approval. Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called out a song that sounded very much like hope. The worst was behind them now. Everything ahead was just beginning. 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter echoed across Mesa Ridge Ranch like music carried on the desert wind. Emma Hayes, now a sturdy 5-year-old with her father's dark hair and her late mother's gentle spirit, chased a pair of barn kittens around the newly expanded corral, while her little brother Thomas toddled after her on unsteady legs. Mercy watched them from the kitchen window as she kneaded bread dough, a smile playing at her lips. The woman who had once faced each day with grim determination now moved with the easy confidence of someone who had found her place in the world. The ranch had prospered beyond her wildest dreams. The Hayes mining claims had provided enough capital to transform the modest horse breeding operation into one of the finest in the territory. But it wasn't the money that had changed everything, it was the family. Mama Mercy, Emma called out, using the name that had evolved naturally over the years. Tommy's trying to eat dirt again. Well, you'd better stop him before he makes himself sick, Mercy called back, wiping flour from her hands on her apron. Through the window, she watched Emma carefully guide her little brother away from the tempting pile of fresh earth where Sam had been planting fence posts. The sound of approaching hooves drew her attention to the road. A familiar figure on horseback was riding up from town, Doc Patterson, now fully recovered from his wounds and serving as the unofficial messenger for important news in Copper Falls. Sam, Mercy called toward the barn. Doc's coming. Sam emerged from the shadowy interior, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hat pushed back on his head. 5 years of peace and honest work had filled out his frame and eased the haunted look that had once never left his eyes. He moved with the confident stride of a man who had found his place in the world and intended to keep it. "Afternoon, Doc," Sam called as Patterson dismounted. "What brings you out our way?" Doc Patterson grinned, pulling a telegram from his jacket pocket. "Got word from the territorial capital this morning. Thought you folks would want to hear it right away." Mercy joined them in the yard, automatically scooping up Thomas while Emma pressed close to her side. Even after all these years, official messages still made her nervous. "Judge Thornfield died in prison last week," Doc announced without preamble. "Consumption, they said. Died alone in a cell, which seems fitting for a man who destroyed so many families." Sam's expression remained carefully neutral, but Mercy saw something ease in his shoulders. A tension he'd carried for so long, it had become part of him. "Good riddance," Mercy said simply. "What about his associates?" the other men involved in the corruption? Most scattered when Thornfield went down. A few ended up in prison themselves, but the rest just disappeared into whatever holes they crawled out of. Doc paused, his expression growing more serious. There is one other thing, though. Thornfield's estate is being liquidated to pay back his victims. The territorial government wants to know if you folks are interested in purchasing some additional mining claims at auction. Seems they think you've proven you can handle the responsibility. Sam and Mercy exchanged a look that spoke of 5 years of shared decisions, shared dreams, shared struggles. "What do you think?" Sam asked her quietly. Mercy looked around at the ranch they'd built together, the sturdy adobe house that had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family, the modern barn that housed the finest horses in 3 territories, the corrals and fencing that spoke of prosperity earned through honest work. Then she looked at the children playing in the dust, secure in their world in a way that neither she nor Sam had ever been at their age. "I think," she said slowly, "that Emma's inheritance is already bigger than any one person needs. Maybe it's time to think about what we can do for other folks." Sam nodded, understanding immediately. A school, maybe, or a proper church for Copper Falls. "Both," Mercy said firmly, "and maybe help for other women trying to run their own spreads. Lord knows I could have used some guidance when I was starting out." Doc Patterson chuckled. "Should have known you two would find a way to turn a business opportunity into charity work. Your father would be proud, Mercy." As if sensing that the adults were discussing important matters, Emma tugged on Mercy's skirt. "Mama Mercy, are we going to be okay?" Mercy knelt down so she was at eye level with the little girl who had changed everything just by existing. Emma's face was serious in the way that only children could manage, when they sensed undercurrents they didn't quite understand. "We're going to be more than okay, sweetheart," Mercy said, brushing a strand of dark hair away from Emma's face. "We're going to be happy, and we're going to help other people be happy too." "Because that's what families do," Sam added, joining them on the ground and pulling Thomas into his lap. "We take care of each other, and we take care of our neighbors." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we have cake to celebrate?" Mercy laughed, the sound carrying across the ranch like a bell ringing in victory. "I think that's an excellent idea." As they walked back toward the house together, Sam carrying Thomas, Emma skipping beside them, and Mercy's hand resting comfortably in the crook of Sam's free arm, the desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. The story that had begun with blood and desperation on a stormy night had become something none of them could have imagined. A tale of redemption, love, and the simple truth that sometimes the most broken people can build the strongest foundations. Behind them, the sun set over Mesa Ridge in a blaze of gold and crimson, painting their long shadows across the land they had fought for, bled for, and ultimately claimed through the oldest right of all, the right of those who refuse to give up hope. In the distance, a night bird called out its evening song, and somewhere in Copper Falls, church bells rang the hour. All was well in their small corner of the world, and tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new reasons to be grateful for the family they had chosen and the life they had built together. The wounded rancher who had collapsed on Mercy Dalton's porch that night was gone forever, replaced by a man who had learned that home wasn't a place you were born to. It was a place you fought to keep, defended with everything you had, and shared with the people brave enough to stand beside you when the storms came. And storms, Mercy knew, always passed eventually. What remained was love, laughter, and the endless possibility of tomorrow.